other people. You actually can thank too. Mrs. Ink and Mr. Anderson are running Writers Week right now, thanks to Mr. Anderson and Mr. Romano on stage, who are the founding fathers of this very week and have taught your teachers what they're teaching you, along with Mr. Bruner, also a mentor, and all former Fremd teachers here to share with you today. They are awesome. I love them, and in the next 50 minutes you will as well. Happy last Writers Week. Can we start with Mr. Bruner? Yes.
Well, thank you for continuing to invite us to come back here, and thank you for keeping this glorious week running at such a high level. You know, good job, friend. Yeah, absolutely. I've probably only said this on this stage in front of this podium a couple hundred times, but you know, Writers Week. Some people think it happens up here. Well, that's one part of it, but the really important part happens out there. So good luck with that. What I'd like to share with you today is kind of scary for me because it's very personal. It's about my dad, who died last June. He was a military man. We didn't connect very well. And while he was alive, I didn't really understand him. He didn't really understand me, although that would have been nice and kind of important. So when his life ended, I tried to understand him by writing my version of his life. And I've spent several months doing that. And I'd like to share with you a shortened version of that project. To enlist in the Air Force, my dad must have somehow convinced himself that he was Air Force material. A proud American, ready to join a newer branch of the military, perceived as more elite than other options. The Air Force was the way out and up. He was sent to West Germany. This was during the Cold War, and America was making sure that West Germany was a viable, stable country by stationing thousands of troops there. There are pictures of my dad in military gear during that time, but there are also pictures of him in lederhosen, hoisting beer steins, and frolicking with Frauleins in beer halls. I'm a little fuzzy on the chronology of when he met my mom and when he re-enlisted. My mom said the first time she saw him, he was leaning up against a car. She must have still been in high school because he came to a basketball game where she was playing. Mom said she remembered being a little embarrassed because he was sitting in the second bleacher row with his foot up on the front row showing some ghastly socks. Now obviously I don't remember my infancy, but the pictures show him holding me, carrying me, smiling at me, and playing with me. My earliest memories are of him providing me with toys, books, and attention. He was being the best dad he knew how to be. Another really early memory is being taught to say, "Yes, sir." To this day, that habit is ingrained in me. He gave orders and he expected them to be obeyed without hesitance or thought of negotiation. My dad had literally been a drill sergeant at some point in his military training, and he brought that home. Kindergarten and first grade are kind of blurred for me. My teachers' names in those grades are Mrs. Fields and Mrs. Franks, but I can't remember which year was which. One of those teachers, I think it was Mrs. Fields and I think it was kindergarten, was black. When my parents came for conferences, she told them that I was the only white student who would hold her hand. My mom liked to tell the story of going to another of my earliest parent conferences, probably first grade. She said my dad was all fancy in his dress uniform and ready to hear about the wonders of the smart son he was raising. Apparently, the report on me wasn't all that glowing. The teacher reported that I liked to sing in the bathroom. Along with an appraisal of my less than stellar academic accomplishments, the teacher said, "It's okay, President Kennedy was only average." This is like just a few months after his death. Well, what exactly did my dad do in the Air Force? When I asked him one time, he said, "I flew a desk." My dad was colorblind, so he could see finer gradations of black, gray, and white. Because of this, he was asked from time to time to look at black and white aerial surveillance photos and describe what he saw. He didn't know if he was looking at Moscow or Kansas City, but he could see shadows and outlines more clearly than those whose visions included a fuller range of colors. Now, I don't remember the exact time or place this next thing happened, but it was when we were living on base housing somewhere. I shoplifted a Richie Rich comic book and some caps for my toy gun from the commissary. I don't know how my parents found out, but my dad had a serious talk with me. I would have been somewhere between 7 and 9 years old. He didn't yell at all, but he just said that what I had done had put our family at risk. He was trying hard to advance in rank, and he would not be able to do so if I was behaving badly like this. He also told me about military training schools, and that if I continued to do things like this, they would have to send me to a military school to straighten me out. The irony is that I was already in a military school, just not one with that level of discipline. I was not made to take back the stolen goods or apologize. My dad said he would take care of it. My guess is that restitution was never made, and it was considered a close call. So what did this episode mean? It meant that my behavior was considered to reflect directly on my family and my dad's career viability. Did it make me want to be a better person? Not really. It just stressed the importance of not getting caught and the consequences of continuing to be bad. There was no Atticus Finch discussion of the difference between right and wrong or how to develop a moral compass. Sometime after my dad received his promotion to Master Sergeant, while we're still living in Germany, he had a heart attack. He was 34 years old. I don't know if he collapsed at work or at home in bed. I just don't know. All I know is that it changed everything. Then he was given an honorable discharge from the Air Force. His military career was involuntarily but honorably ended. The United States Air Force basically said, "You're too much of a risk. Thank you for your service. Goodbye." He must have been devastated. He was a military man with no military. He was a young man with a bad heart. He was a family man with no job and no home. So we moved to the small Iowa town where he and Mom were from. He still had military expectations, and I was trying to be a normal kid in a town very different from where I'd been growing up. I'd lived on military bases for virtually my entire life. I'd been in I don't know how many schools. I didn't know how to make or keep friends because military kids are just thrown together temporarily. I felt very different from everyone else in that town. By 6th grade in 1970, I really wanted to be more like other kids. My dad hated long hair. His word for long hair was kooks. This applied to the Beatles, the hippies on TV, and any boys or men with hair over their ears. So along comes me in the 1970s. Vietnam era, time in American history where long hair was not just a style but a statement, a countercultural rejection of how grown-ups did things, especially military things. I was not allowed to have bangs or any kind of length to my hair. In junior high, I recombed my hair after leaving home in the morning, and in high school, I grew out some prodigious hair. This is really the beginning of a stretch where I didn't talk to my dad very much, roughly 10 years. Mom was trying to keep him healthy. She learned about cholesterol, and her cooking incorporated promised margarine and egg beaters. Besides being worried about life in general, his biggest stress was me. I don't remember what lit the fuse, but one time when I was in high school, I was telling my mom about some conflict my dad and I were having. Mom and I were in the kitchen, and she was cooking. She slammed down the potato masher and said, "If he has another heart attack, I will blame you." And not wanting to be the cause of another heart attack, or at least being blamed for it, I avoided him and definitely didn't talk to him if I didn't have to. This was kind of like the shoplifting episode. The family fortunes were tied to my behavior. I realize now that was unfair to put on me as a kid. I needed to learn to be a good person because morality is inherently valuable, but I was taught that my good behavior was necessary to avoid external consequences for the family. For me, that translated again to, as long as I don't get caught, anything I do is fine. So I got good at not getting caught. I don't know what he thought of me during those high school years. I assumed he thought I was a bum with a specialization in wasted potential. I never got any messages of approval, but maybe on the best days, he saw that other people thought I was okay, so maybe he figured that he just didn't understand me. He didn't know how to process me in his thinking. He didn't know about music or other things I was interested in. He didn't know how to say or show that he cared, so I assumed he didn't like me. Now I flash forward about 40 years to last summer. graveside service was military. I got a little choked up during taps, but I never shed a tear. Still haven't. When the local veterans folded the flag from Dad's casket and passed it to my stepmother on behalf of the President of the United States and a grateful nation, my knees almost buckled. That flag was the culmination of a military life, and it was earned by my dad, yes, but also by my mom, my brother, and me. I wish I could grieve, and I guess that's why I'm writing this. I want to understand him. He was a difficult man, and I'm no walk in the park. He was probably angry at how some things turned out, but he aimed his anger at me. That made me strong in some ways, damaged me in others. It would have meant so much to me to hear him say good job or good idea or somehow let me know he thought I was okay or that he was proud of me. And my tendency is to find fault in other people and expect them to be more than they are or different from how they want to be. And that comes from him. The military I grew up in is still in my skeleton, but the rest of me is in constant resistance to it. The lesson isn't so much about forgiveness as it is acceptance. I can forgive easily. Lord knows I've made enough mistakes and relied on the forgiveness of others. But saying, oh well, that's just how he was, is harder when it had so many rippling effects. I hope the passage of time will help with that. And I wish my dad well wherever he is, and I sincerely hope he's at peace. Thanks. Hey, this is Tony Romano.
That's exactly how you say it too. Hey! You know, really enjoyed that piece. He talks about how the only lesson he got out of all that was not getting caught, but Gary has one of the soundest moral compasses that you'll come across. So somewhere along the line, he did a good job. Maybe in an indirect way, but really sweet piece. And I've heard him say, yes, sir. You know, at home during the week, sometimes I check on Twitter what's being tweeted while you're sitting there, and there's a lot of pressure. I feel like I have to say something memorable. So I wrote a few lines, and I'm just going to say them right at the outset so that you can just forget about it, so that the pressure will be off. So yesterday I wrote, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Now it sounds familiar, but it's a little different. You might have heard whispers, but mine is whisper. So it's a little different. I'm working on a novel. I want to read the first couple chapters. It's very short. And when I look back at my career in writing, it's just an experience in playing. I start out with first person, then I tried third person, then I tried a female point of view, then I tried, I can write a book. And I've never written a mystery, so I thought, I want to write a mystery. In one sense, everything you write is a mystery, even a math equation, you don't know what the answer is. But this is one of those straight-up mysteries that you might see on Law & Order or something like that. It's set in Chicago. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. 1 week after my 16th birthday, and 2 months after Mom was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, my father left us. It was early October, and we didn't know he'd left us. Not right away. Another business trip, we thought, if we gave it that much thought. I remember feeling this ache of guilt, hoping he wouldn't come home. It was a real ache that traveled from my neck to my head and settled there like a dull throb. I made the mistake of saying something to my older brother, Jesse. He whacked me on the back of the head. There, is that better? He said. Stop, asswipe. How's this? He slapped at me again. I punched his shoulder. Mistake number 2. Though I'm almost a head taller, my brother is as solid as a bag of rocks. We were outside in front of the house where Mom wouldn't hear us. She wouldn't see Jesse push me to the ground either and plant a knee in my chest. Stop! The harder I fought, the deeper he buried his knee. I can't breathe! He rolled off of me and dove into wrestling mode, locking me in his favorite move, the grapevine. I became a pretzel. My torso twisted one way, my neck the other. He stuffed a handful of damp leaves down the back of my shirt. So you can't breathe, huh? But you can talk? Let go! Or what, you'll scream like the wuss that you are? You're the wuss, get off! He knew I wouldn't scream, that I didn't want to upset Mom. I kept thinking I should take back what I said about Dad, then maybe he'd let me go. Instead, I said, "We're better off without him." He glanced toward the house to check for Mom. "I hope," I said. "You hope what, Nancy?" he said, with a little extra torque on my neck. For the record, my name is not Nancy, it's Sam. "I hope someone landed one good punch," I said, "right in the face." Like he'd done to Mom, I wanted to add. Not quite a fist, the back of his hand, but hard. That time he thought Jessie and I weren't home, though not the only time. I squirmed out of his grapevine, but with a quick turn he caught me in a headlock. "One good punch, eh?" He pulled up on my arm, tightening his grip. A trace of his aftershave assaulted me, a scent I usually liked. Even in pain, the scent was oddly reassuring. "Or maybe he got hit by a bus," he said. "That's what you really wish, ain't it? Or he got his tie caught in an elevator, and it choked him. Or the elevator just got stuck, and then crashed, boom." With each new way to hurt our father, he squeezed tighter. Not because he wanted to punish me. He couldn't help himself. Each new scenario brought him grim satisfaction. "Maybe," I said, breathing hard, "maybe one of his clients, maybe one of them kicked his ass." I twisted and our eyes met, like we should have done. This finally got him to ease up on me. This was the real reason he was pissed, because he hadn't done anything to protect Mom. My chest was heaving, though the throbbing in my head was gone. Mom came to the screen door. Getting there took great effort. She didn't call out. She'd seen this too many times. Even through the screen, you could see how sick she was. Her short hair was flat, without color. Her skin was like paper. We stood up and brushed ourselves off, leaves falling from us. We called each other a few names to show her this was just another one of our usual brawls. Nothing else going on here. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time Jessie and I would ever wrestle. In chapter 2, I held her hand. We sat close to one another in the living room, and I held her hand. I couldn't remember how this started. Mom positioned her chair near the window at the side of the house, which gave her a view of the sidewalk. She was always looking for the next person to appear down our tree-lined street, and when someone did, she held our gaze. Curiosity lining her face. A trace of worry, too, sometimes, like now, with Mrs. Ingersoll lurching toward us, heading home. I barely glanced outside. I studied my mother instead. I tried to recall the color of her hair. Brown, of course, before, long and straight and brown, but always a different shade depending on how much time she spent in the sun. I tried to remember her voice before it had turned to gravel. "That limp," she said, "her hip's bad again." I didn't care about the limp or the stupid scarf the old hunch hag wore over her salon hair. She was all snarl, especially when you asked her to buy something for school that you didn't want to sell in the first place. But Mom, she didn't see any of this. And with cancer, she became even more blind to anything mean or selfish, while I had become more of an asshole. "Maybe you and Jess can go over there later, see if she needs help." "Yeah, I can scrape out the bottle of mouthwash she hasn't used in 100 years. She ignored this and watched Mrs. Ingersoll disappear, then turned to the ash tree next door, where two birds were fighting, or whatever it is that birds do. They darted in and out of the tree, squawking in complaint. They stopped finally, giving way to the sound of distant cars passing one another, then to the hum of the fridge and the tick of the standing clock, then finally to Mom's breathing. Everything always came back to that. "Do you miss him?" I asked. "Do you miss Dad?" She blinked and gazed at me as if I had just woken her. A smile pushed through. "I do," she said. "I miss him like my root canals. Remember those?" She had to have 3, all within a few months, all in the same area, the dentist needing to dig deeper each time to clean out the diseased tissue. I wanted a real answer. I'd seen their wedding album. They were happy once, for better or worse. Yeah, right, there was never a worse in my father's world. Things went his way. So I didn't ask again, I wouldn't press. They probably couldn't have imagined that things would come to this. Or were the seeds already there, which is what I believe. My father was the man he'd always be, and either Mom never saw him clearly, or she thought she could change him. "How's the pain?" She squeezed my hand. "Not too bad today." Her usual response. I wanted to ask her about the cancer. I didn't even know what kind she had, only that it was a female cancer, too far along to be rooted out. And I suspected that it interfered with her wifely duties, as my father saw them, which is why he left. To be honest, I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to talk about it at all. Why would anyone? Unless you could do something about it. Some problems were unsolvable. which included late-stage cancer, and deadbeat dads. My brother disagreed, though not about the cancer. And that's the end of chapter 2. So I'll take your clapping as a sign that you would want to read more. So I need that affirmation. I'm not quite done with the book yet. So, my good friend and golf buddy and another fount of wisdom, Mr. Kevin Bruner.
It's going to be a bad day for dads today. This I entitled Original Sin. And maybe some people will understand. During the summer of 1962, when I was 12, just killing time, and my father was for a time not around much, I discovered sin. He had never been around much to begin with, me being employed when he was employed, usually on the night shift, most likely in order to allow himself the opportunity to play golf every day. Therefore, when I was home, he was either sleeping or out, which improved my disposition when I was home. My brothers and I had, since infancy, been trained to walk on those proverbial eggs around the house when he was sleeping, so being away from home seemed much more natural than staying. In fact, I had acquired entire other families throughout the neighborhood willing to feed me lunch, offer me dinner, whether they had children my age or not, because my father's temper had become infamous. My lot in life loomed ahead of me as some vagabond in suburbia, a homeless child lurking between the ranch houses and split levels, seeking rest from a weary life. I exaggerate, of course. Most of the time, I played baseball. Baseball was cheap, and we didn't need much in the way of equipment, a glove, a ball, sometimes a bat. But as much time as I played baseball, I dreamed of golf. To play golf, I needed $1 for the local course. And once there, I could beat balls around all day. The course, Green Acres, was more brown than green and had 27 of the motliest, godforsaken golf holes you could ever imagine. We even nicknamed it Parched Acres. But for $1, I couldn't complain. In order for me to earn a buck, I'd golf ball hunt. That meant walking or riding my bike 2 miles to the course, scouring the out-of-bounds area, finding lost balls, and trying to sell them to golfers on the course. Besides having to haggle with cheap golfers, I had to keep my eye out for the owner of the course. He was never very thankful. He liked his monopoly on used balls and would try to catch me. But I could see him from a long way off, loading his lard ass into his little cart and leaving the clubhouse. Long before he could reach me, I'd disappear into the corn. Once I'd sold a dozen or so balls, I could play. I don't think he ever knew that I was his biggest competitor in used golf balls, but the irony that he still got all the money never lost on me. One day, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, with the temperature creeping in the upper 80s, I was tramping between the cornfield and the waist-high weeds along a par 5 on the southern border of the course, when a ball zipped over my head and ripped through the corn in front of me. Cornfields are by far the easiest place in the world to find balls. The ground between the rows rarely has anything but dirt, and white golf balls seem to glow on top of the black soil. Although I had already walked the corn roads, when this ball came sailing over my head, I jumped through the first row of corn, then another, and there in the third row, about 20 feet ahead, I could see its whiteness calling to me. I picked it up. A brand new Titleist 2, and worth all of 35 cents to even the cheapest SOB. Well, picking up a golf ball was definitely against everything I had ever been taught about golf. But the ball was out of bounds, and the poor slob who'd hit the errant ball here would have to play another shot off the tee anyway. Once in a while, I'd pick up balls that were out of play and then sell them to the sap that hit them there. But still, picking up the ball, at least until the group had gone by, bothered me. You see, I knew the rules. I may not have been able to hit the ball more than 180 yards, but I was weaned on the rules since the Paleozoic era. Or maybe Mama sang them to me while I was still in the womb. In any case, I'm sure I knew them before I could crap in the toilet. I decided to take a look to see if the guy who hit the ball out there might be someone who jumped the fence and looked for the ball. After sneaking back through the previous rows, I peeked around and watched this guy pulling his golf bag with a handcart coming through the line of trees that separated the fairway from the out of bounds. At first, my eyes about jumped out of my head, and I had to shake myself to make sure I hadn't been hit by the ball and didn't remember. But damn, if the slob coming at me didn't look like my old man. I just about choked. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe he just looked like my old man. After all, I hadn't really seen him in a few weeks. As he got closer, though, I recognized a waddle in the stupid hat he wore to cover his balding head. And no one could mistake those awful plaid shorts. Still, I shook my head. I was confused. How the hell could he hit the ball in this direction? Only slicers hit off the tee into the cornfield. And I couldn't remember him ever slicing a golf ball. Sliced the hair off my head, yeah, but not golf ball. So I faced a dilemma. Time was running out, and he was closing in. I could throw the ball into play, or I could try to sell it back to him. He had to know the ball was overheating. But every golfer hopes that the ball hit a rock or a squirrel and bounce back in. If I threw the ball in, I would violate one of my two principles, both of which revolved around the sanctity of golf rules. If I tried to sell it back to him, he'd beat the crap out of me the next time we ran into each other. That night or a week from now. He held grudges for several millennia. Or he could beat the crap out of me on the spot, a decidedly real possibility. I opted to toss the ball into play. Hell, this is my old man, and I knew he was playing for money. Hi, how you doing? I asked from the other side of the fence. Want to buy any balls? He ignored my sales pitch. Didn't even look at me. You see my ball around here? He asked, his eyes searching the ground along the fence line. Yeah, it's right over there. I pointed to his ball. I'd thrown behind a tree. I might throw his ball in for him, but I wasn't going to make the shot easy. Hell, I could have sworn it flew out of bounds. He stood over the ball, looking down, trying to figure out how the ball landed there. Then he looked up, gazing over my head, into the cornfield. I pondered, stroking my chin like I'd seen Uncle Ike do at Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe it hit that possum I saw wandering around here. Possums are nocturnal, he said, staring straight through me. Well, maybe it hit the head on too many times to know it was daylight, I ventured. He bent over to check him and make sure the ball was his. You still playing those Titleist twos, I asked. This time he looked straight at me. I thought I saw a smirk curling at the edges of his mouth. The closest thing he'd come to a smile in the whole 3 or 4 months he'd been around home. But maybe the heat was causing me to hallucinate. Maybe his mouth twitched, wondering if he recognized me. This is a tough shot. Yeah, could have been out of bounds though, I proclaimed. If you keep punching those balls OB, you might need a few more. You want to buy any? I don't have any Titleists left, but I'll give you a deal on the best ones here. By the way, how much are you playing for? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a roll of cash, and peeling off a $5, told me, go home, maybe I'll see you at dinner. He did recognize me. He turned around without even looking at the balls I had in my bag. Good luck, I said over my shoulder while making my way back to the road. But I wasn't going home. I had $5. The sun would be up for at least 4 more hours. I could get 27 holes in if I hurried, and I needed atonement for my sin. Some round robin here stuff, so we'll see what else comes up. This time, Mr. Anderson.
Well, I write a lot of book reviews, and I get a lot of free books, free audiobooks, kind of nice. But I generally try to keep them positive. If I read something I don't like, A, I don't finish it, and B, I don't need to put any more negativity in the world, except sometimes. And sometimes when a book is just so vile, or when something happens, I just gotta let fly. And so I want to read 2 negative book reviews. And of course, my book reviews, people see them, and that's fine. But these negative ones, people respond to, with their likes and their thumbs ups or whatever, in much greater volume. Anyway, the first one is a review of a book called Let's Explore Diabetes with Owls by David Sedaris. Anybody know David Sedaris? Humorist. Well, there it goes. I usually like the work of David Sedaris. He's at his best when talking about his family or childhood memories or wryly observing society's foibles. Less Explored Diabetes with Owls has moments of that trademark understated irony, but it's more self-absorbed than his earlier collections. This book's primary theme seems to be the travails of a successful author as he fulfills his tiresome obligations to accept invitations to read his work out loud in exotic locations like China, Rotterdam, and Costco. But travel wearies Sedaris, as do most other people. It's no surprise that he doesn't allow those who stand in line to purchase an autographed book to take pictures with him. Then he retires to one of his homes in England or France or Japan or New York and writes about how awful it is to be anywhere. Although this book gave me a few chuckles, some topics are inherently unfunny, although Sedaris uses them as punchlines. Teen suicide, cancer, ingestion of human feces, eye socket sex. Yuck. Less Explored Diabetes with Owls is a disappointment because it is so much meaner and cruder, not to mention less funny, than earlier Sedaris books. Okay. This other one is a book called The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes, who is apparently a producer of television shows I've never seen. But the book is about her committing to saying yes to opportunities in the course of a year. So I tried this book. Well, I wasn't going to say anything about this book because I abandoned it. Then the publisher advertised it on my Facebook feed, inviting my comments. I left a negative comment based on what I read, which the publisher then deleted. So here goes. The self-indulgent twaddle in this book became nauseous early on. Rhimes spends a surprising amount of time talking about whether or not certain situations will cause her to poop her pants. I pulled the plug when she speculated about the sex life and drug abuse of Mary Poppins. This book originally appealed to me because I thought it would be about prioritizing for joy. Nope. There was a lot more about poop than there was about anything insightful or joyous. Reviewing a book I didn't finish is not my usual approach, but I also don't think the publisher should use my feed to promote its product and then cherry pick the feedback. You should see how many comments that's got. Last one. This is a picture book entitled A Birthday Cake for George Washington, which shows all his happy slaves getting ready to celebrate his birthday. I had a little problem with that. And it came just after another book that had been published called A Fine Dessert that also portrayed the happy life of slaves. Anyway, I cannot separate my thoughts on A Birthday Cake for George Washington from the controversies surrounding it and A Fine Dessert, also published this year. I'll admit that when I read A Fine Dessert, my uh-oh radar did not go off. Yes, I noticed that a couple of pages dealt with slavery, and the slaves seemed happy enough in the brief episode involving them. Call it ignorance or whatever you want, but I gave the author and illustrator benefit of the doubt that even in the misery of slavery, individuals could be at least somewhat happy for a little while. Then the firestorm broke, and I asked some people smarter than me what I had missed in my reading. They patiently explained it to me, and I came away wiser. A Birthday Cake for George Washington is way different. This is an entire book filled with page after page of text and pictures of slaves who seem to regard their lot as nothing more than just another occupation. They seem focused, satisfied, and yes, happy about serving George and Martha Washington. This is not a brief episode in a larger work. The slave's blithe existence is the created world of A Birthday Cake for George Washington. Although I can't begin to fathom the editorial approach that thought this was okay, I don't think the author and illustrator were overtly trying to be racist. My guess is they were aiming for upbeat and ended up being stone-tone deaf. The result is a book that is not acceptable for young readers. Impressionable young readers are likely to come away from A Birthday for George Washington thinking that slavery doesn't seem all that bad. We can't have that. I'm tempted to give this 1 star, but I need to reserve that for intentionally offensive books. I don't think that's the case here. This book is just careless and insensitive, and the story is actually kind of boring. So sometimes people write about stories when they don't even have to. All right, who's got something?
I'm not sure how many people have electric cars out there. I drove down in Guelph last a year ago Christmas, and so I wrote this up. I kind of wanted to see how much it was going to actually cost. And so this is entitled, Why Wait? time to plug in. In the fall of 2015, I researched electric cars because I knew my aged Hyundai wouldn't last forever. I hoped the rust bucket would survive through winter until spring. Oh well. I began looking for electric cars last December 2015. My Mercedes-Benz makes one called the B-Class. Try finding a B-Class Mercedes here in the hinterland. All are shipped to either the East Coast or West Coast. Nissan makes one. Tesla makes several. And BMW makes two. I can't afford a Tesla. Maybe the Tesla 3, if it becomes available. I wasn't much impressed with the Nissan Leaf, but that might just be me. That left me with only one choice. The BMW i3. Or the i8, but I don't have $148,000. Not now, not ever. After Christmas 2015, my wife and I looked to test drive the i3. 2 dealerships close enough had 6 cars. At one dealer, we bought one of the 3 they had on the lot that day. We purchased one with a range extender, or known as a REX, which is a small gasoline engine that, should the batteries run out of electricity, the engine kicks in and charges the system. Fact, not alternative fact. The average American drives less than 50 miles a day. Sometimes, however, we needed more. And because we occasionally drive more than 70 miles a day, we wanted the REX so that we could drive more if needed. And because I wanted to prove to myself, at least, that this purchase was a good choice, I began keeping track of the mileage, the cost of gasoline, and the number of kilowatts of electricity used, and the cost of both each month. This January, last month,